Congratulations to all the teams that made it. We would like to introduce the adjudicators of the grand finals. We have from University Malaya, Fatin and Leroy. From Unimas, Mr. Albert. From University Malaysia Sabah, Debra Mok. From Management and Science University, Amir. From UPM, Dr. Akira. And from MCMC, Mr. K. Gisli Aziz. And now moving on to the teams. On opening government, we have UT Mara, comprising of Maizura Mohsin and Akila Zulekha. On opening opposition, we have WSDC SA, and Siddhartha Vidya Sayar. On closing government, we have WSDC SR, Don Silva Pereira, and Rashid Saladin. On closing opposition, we have WSDC CAK, Anik Haziz and Kishan Sibamala. And on the motion today that in order to promote national unity, this House believes that media in post-conflict societies should not report on past atrocities, we call upon the Prime Minister of the opening government to begin this report. Hello?
When history causes a lot of pain and they cause us to not be able to move on, we think the media should never try to publicize and capitalize on that. So what is this debate about, right? This debate is about the long-term rehab of a traumatized society that just escaped the consequences of a civil war or an outright invasion. So this debate is never about the short-term backlash of availability of information, because we would agree on the fact that we concede that the harms will happen, but the ultimate goal here is to patch up a broken society and in the long term restore their capacity to live together in harmony. And we think that is the greater good in this debate, not a society that always dwells on historical reminiscence of the past that continuously fuels the cycle of conflict. So how will our world looks like in opening government, right? Because our setup will be like this. Firstly, this debate will only happen when a post-conflict society has established a working government in recovery. If they will have a trusted leader and they will have a functioning state in practice. Secondly, we are gonna go hardline with this debate sit down. So we're gonna operate on censorship, on past atrocities, all together in media coverages, i.e., like what communities were involved within the debate and what motivations were there for the conflict. In principle, if there are other alternatives of finding out about the conflict, then we are going to shut it down. We are totally okay with that. So this debate is about media because they are the mainstream communication of the society and we think they are the actor that can perpetuate it more and we do not endorse that. Sit down. So let's talk about right? Because we have two arguments coming from Prime Minister. Firstly, on how post-conflict society always use history as a tool to implement victor's justice. And what is victor's justice? Victor's justice is when whoever wins the war, they are also perceived as to win the moral high ground of the war, and the losers will always feel oppressed past the post-conflict. But the problem is status quo is that when you have a civil war and when you have any sectarian violence, you also have a community of the war that represent one side. So the leader always represent one side. So the problem with that is that there's no sustaining there's always sustaining motivation for you to overthrow the leader, and it is caught in a cycle, and we think that is even more harmful. So because the leader of the revolution always represent one community, and what does it lead to? Firstly, it will lead to the losers feel not feeling represented. And secondly, this loser will try to utilize past atrocities to initially hibernate, but then they will just re-centralize and perpetuate the conflict so that they are able to hijack the standing government. So let's talk about the modus operandi of a civil wars, right? Because what actually happens in civil wars? Physical violence are used to gain capital and to gain power in civil wars. So the problem here is that both winning and losing team want to decide the narrative of history that are mentioned. Both will try to say that they are oppressed and that's the reason why they are justified in doing certain things. And we take this example when you allow them to continuously use this narrative to manipulate the government and therefore not achieving the unity that you wanted. So, and the problem with media is that there's a lot of sensationalization in media. And the thing is, it's not like nobody knows what happened in the war because information was then outrightly available. But the thing is, we don't need them to dwell. We don't need you, the media, to keep telling them that this is what happened to you and you should try to get revenge for it. So in terms of post-conflict society, it always takes a long time for them to re-establish a medium of communication between all parties that are involved. Both are trying to decide what are they going to be. So the thing about confirmation bias is that it exists. And what happened is that whenever a party has done something wrong, you will always try to say that these are the reason of the war and it is not justified. So how do we find the best middle ground? We want to block out all this information because we think when you don't have the past atrocities to dwell on, you will shift your focus to how we are going to construct this society and how are we going to best get unity for the society. So we think, for instance, in the Iraqi government, right, they create quotas they create quotas in parliament and put the Kurds and the other people there. So we have a unity there because nobody resents us trying to get the people even in the parliament. But in the status quo, the problem here is that everyone is bogged down. They are dissatisfied because the scar is still fresh. So we think these are the sort of things that hinders you from unity because you are not able to forget because the media keep on shoving it in your face that you are the winner or you are the loser. So we think it's very harmful and therefore we do not endorse that product.
So do you agree, in a vast majority of circumstances, families and victims will have a one-dimensional view of the war anyways?
Yeah, so that's the reason why we don't want you to keep them shoving it in their face so that they are not able to use this narrative to keep manipulating and keep demanding things that are unwarranted to them. So let's talk about the second argument and why this is important, right? The second argument is of how now there is a projection of a fearful and distrustful society sit down. So, on the first level, because communities, especially fresh ones that are just out of conflict, will continuously hold on to history as a motivation to attack later. Because if you lost the war, you will not be satisfied and you always always have this motivation to cast a standing government. So we think there is nobody will try to opt into the choice of reconciliation, and we think it becomes even more perpetuated under that side when you keep telling them that you should try to get revenge, that you should try to not achieve unity because this war is not justified for you. So we think the state should take back this narrative, and we think therefore the state should focus on how do we actually best achieve unity. So what is the conclusion here? In the short term, yes, we agree to the fact that people will remember what happened to them. But in the long term, we think when there are less older people, the stories become irrelevant. So what happened then? People will forget the war. People, at the very least, they wouldn't be so hurtful for them, and therefore they are able to move on and achieve unity because these things become irrelevant later in the future. So what is it? And then very quickly, So what is the nature of coverage? It's very visceral and it's very triggering, right? So people will be less rational when they see these pictures because you put emotional factors and you trigger to them that they have to act emotionally based on all this picture. So you make it less likely for any cooperation to happen and therefore these people wouldn't want to move forward. So we think by no means are we saying that this will diminish the effect, this will diminish, but the counterfactual of what happens on the debt side will make corporations more unlikely, and these are the same exact thing that we are trying to hinder. So we already know that you killed somebody's mother, that you killed and raped somebody's sister, but you don't need to put more salt into the wound. We want you to move on, and therefore we think we are proud to propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And now to begin the case for opposition side, we invite the leader of opposition. Hi. Okay.
Hi, so members of the audience, we would really appreciate some silence during the speeches. It's highly disrespectful if you laugh during speeches or you talk very loudly, because then that will disrupt the ability of the adjudicators to hear the speeches, and that will disrupt their ability to make proper adjudication. So we would really appreciate if you keep most of your conversations like to a minimum. All right? Thank you very much.
Okay? Cool. Every day, the child of a mother who died in the genocide will live in a world in which there is no information on the death toll, there's no information on the people who killed his mother, in a world in which there is no acceptance of guilt. The metric for national unity cannot be silence. It cannot be nobody engaging with one another. The metric is justice. In a world in which individuals have not been brought to light, even if court processes are over, we would rather fight that fight than remain in a world that is silent, a world in which is dictated by the victor of that war, the state you deem so justified in this debate. I will explain three things in my speech. The first, under which side are we more likely to have sustainable long-term peace? Even if we can't have that, we prefer a world in which justice is achieved, even if it's by people who had that war. The second, in which world are we more likely to accept guilt and accept that people were harmed and move on from it? And the third thing, in which world are we less likely to recommit those crimes and have long-term sustainability? But before I go to that, I'd like to ask one question to the speaker before me. A world that does not have the media reporting on it, no matter how biased it may be, is a world in which the government is in charge of the monopoly. Not only that government, your parents, who every day believe that the Hutus are right and they kill the Tutsis for a good reason, will tell their child, will tell their communities, will preach in church that we are right individuals. So an absence of the media doesn't mean the world becomes neutral, it just gets monopolized by the people who are more powerful within that war. The outcome is, Mr. Speaker, is you will entrench the horrible nature that these people have. You will say the state is right when it has insidiously discriminatory policies, but it decides to clamp down on individuals when parents tell you not to mix with the Tutsi person because he claimed we are genocidarists. That is a world in which individuals are not really united. That is a world in which you have a facade of unity and insidious discrimination becomes true. We will never forget a person died, but you never allow this individual to exercise this because you say victor's justice happens on our side. It happens in your world. Don't pretend that the media is a biased media. Obviously, we reported on Rwanda. We reported 800,000 people died. Hutus were the reasons for it, often because of the racial tension that existed. The media is not biased. Your world is. Before I go into my arguments, sure, Saran.
Right, so draw comparative. In your world, your biggest harm is that certain individuals will be insidiously discriminated. But rather we take the comparative is people will go in and out of civil war where you will have a bloodshed for the next decade.
Great. We think insidious discrimination is far more harmful than fighting the fight. And I will make this comparison
in my speech. The first, why does reporting increase our access to acknowledgement and to actually fight the issue? We say this information was not characterized with the opening government. I'll do it for you. Things like the death toll, the outcome of Gakaka courts, the decisions within the circumstances, active things that cause people to instigate the war. So the Hutus who decided the Tutsis were in power for too long as a result of Belgian rule, all these things will be reported in the media. Have a seat. These things are valuable because they allow society to decide what's right and what's wrong. What do we mean by this? This means in our world there's a better capacity to either accept guilt or to accept that harms were recreated. We are more than happy for people to go to war and to fight the good fight. If it's true that my mother was hurt in the war and she was killed and the Tutsi government is still in power, then maybe you should go back to war. You should fight that fight. People should die. If that means individuals have a better world after that. If that means generations after will not suffer from oppressive government, will not get jobs, we think a few people dying is preferable to this continuous life and misery that you put generations into. We think the outcome of this preferably will be people going in and out of war, but that is a world in which at least victims are empowered to understand that they lost people, and that empowerment means they are more likely to push guilt on individuals. An example of this would be like the Gakaka courts, right? We actively allow individuals to prosecute one another, and that meant people on both sides accepted guilt, and that is a world in which you are more likely to have positive reaction. Your world doesn't allow that same metric. Have a seat. But why is insidious discrimination so pernicious and horrible that we would rather people die in a war? Here are 5 reasons. The first, we think insidious discrimination transcends generation. So barriers that you create in your world will never be removed. Things like the state not having a quota. Don't lie, in Iraq there's no quota for like Sunnis, that's an absolute lie. In a lot of countries, there's no acknowledgement that they deserve any equal treatment. In a lot of countries, these people end up becoming victims of systematic discrimination. We think if you put people in a position to pick up arms, if you put people in a position to fight the good fight, that is a world in which they can correct that system. Maybe a better government will come up, they will fix those systems, their children won't have to suffer from it. We would rather people die and have a better life for their children than to live suffer lives for the rest of their life. That is a world in which national unity will never happen. Have a seat. But does reconciliation happen better on the side of government or on the side of opposition? We say if reconciliation comes at the expense of perpetuating the superiority complex that the victims of war have, reconciliation can be foregone. If it means that individuals will forever be separated but accept the guilt of one another, that is a national unity that is not barred of justice. If that means people will never reconcile with the fact that Hutus and Tutsis will always be in war, but that country is one that fought for the just system that exists, that is preferable. Because you unite everybody and assume everyone is the same, but it's not true. Every day the Hutu person will say, I'm superior to you, I am preferable to you, I won the war, therefore I'm right. The victor's justice you say is a horrible thing, will perpetuate the things like not giving reparations, not giving equal access to them. We say that is a world in which people are more likely to recommit these crimes, which is my third extension. Why, have a seat, why are individuals more likely to enter war, and a war that is horrible in your world? If it is true that the metric on our side is justice and people should fight a just war, in your world they would be fighting a war that is based on information. So people who did not have access to information would fight a war based on who did what, as opposed to fighting actively against the causes of that war, the reasons of that war, having a discussion on whether or not those reasons are legitimate to begin with. If we do not establish what is right and what is wrong, whether or not the Hutus actually have a right to kill the Tutsis, those reasons are ambiguous. Your parents can control it, individuals can control it. We say that is a world in which this ambiguity will lead individuals to fight unjust wars, wars that are not reasonable. The genocide you disagree happened in Rwanda will happen again, not as a result of importance, but as a result of not being able to decide what is right and wrong. That is a world in which reconciliation is worse. That is a world in which people will never come together because information does not exist for both parties. So no one will accept guilt in your side. The Hutu you say is an extremist, will be in charge of the government, never accept guilt and believe he's right. We say that transcends generations and it will harm people. If it means going to war, Mr. Speaker, then we are so happy to say people should go to war, fight and avenge your mother who died. If that means a system that comes after that is a system that is perfectly fine, we are supremely proud to oppose.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition. We now invite the Deputy Prime Minister to the stage to defend the case for government. Here he is.
I'd just like to begin this debate by saying how proud I am of my teammate Akila here. She has finally reached her first grand finals ever after 9 consecutive semi-finals. I am happy you broke Sam's curse, and I'm happy to be the person doing it with you. I'm going to answer 2 questions in this debate, positive material integrated, and I'll tell you at which point in time it was the positive material is being integrated. Firstly, will post-conflict societies actually have access to any information, and is that a necessary prerequisite for closure? And secondly, which model ensures more sustainable peace? And I'm going to have a more comparative response than what we heard from the speaker before me. Let's look at access to information, and is that actually necessary? Because firstly, all this short-term uncertainty on what's happening and ambiguity, we think is an irrelevant concern. Why? Because civil wars have spanned over decades, and for some nations, actually centuries. It's not like they don't know who was on which side, what were the motivations of those communities. In fact, civil wars, more often than not, are extremely well organized. We know the political objectives of both communities. There's extensive international coverage on what were those motivations and what were those political clashes. These people who are fresh from that war, they already have that information. Right now, what's going to happen is the information that you blare out, either way, regardless if it's truthful or not truthful, will face confirmation bias for both sides. So we don't need that information. We need a re-strategized focus on what elements of nation building do we want to look forward to, and I'll explain that more in the future in my debate. In my speech, take a seat. Secondly, what about information that is being passed down privately according to Amrit? So we can see that this will happen, that sometimes information will pass down privately, but we have 2 responses. Firstly, we think this information will pass down within the short term. We think when older generations are reducing numerically, we think what happens in the future, when you have better policies and when you have peaceful interactions, the younger generations are less likely to take heed of the myths of old folklore, in the same way that younger generations of Malaysians are less racist because they're able to see peaceful interactions with each other within schools and within social interactions, that when your grandmother and grandfather says there was extremely racist interaction in the past, you take less credence of it because we're focused on nation building within the future. But the second response is this: people who pass down information privately will do it under both models nonetheless. So under your side of the house, we're talking about a scale of half. If under your side they're so angry they will still pass down this information, you blaring it out on mainstream media, either way, it's going to face confirmation bias. I.e., number 1, for the people who are losers, whenever the winners flaunt their victory and say they were the morally righteous party, you will continuously feel oppressed moving on within that society. Versus the winners, when they watch all of this coverage, they will still feel like they rightfully discriminated these individuals because they were oppressed in the past. Either way, the harm is going to be magnified on your side of the house, and the lack of information is not the debate here. It's when you have those harmful information, do you perpetuate it or do you restrict it and focus on the future? We will focus on the future of this side of the house. Secondly, which models ensures more sustainable peace? 4 points to look at. The first point, take a seat, Amrit. Opening opposition presumes that one party in the civil war will take definite responsibility and that people will definitively move on. What was the structural characterization that you heard from Prime Minister that completely destroys this? Number 1, that even when governments are responsible, all political actors will take the chance to sensationalize the nature of this information because it's a political tool that can be exploited to regain power. What we need to remember is that this is a unique time window in which we just gain political power through active violence. That means that for the losers, they're not going to be thinking, now I just have to move on in corporate. They're going to be thinking, what can I do to regain the power that I just lost? In that sensitive time window, sensationalization of information is far more likely to happen. You'll have less individuals wanting to take responsible for atrocities and more people accusing the other party of being harmful. The second reason we gave you structural characterization is that the kind of information when it comes to this coverage is going to be extremely visceral in nature. They're going to cover dead bodies. There's going to be a lot of emotional responses. We want cooperation from all parties in moving forward in this post-conflict society. If you impugn political decisions with emotional reactions, what's going to happen to the minority who wants to move forward? When he sides with the government by saying that's a damn good policy to move forward, he's going to be called a betrayer of the community. You forgot the death of your mother. You forgot the death of your father. How dare you realign yourself with the oppressors? As opposed to censoring that information and focusing on what are individually and independently good policies for your communities. For example, the Iraqi Kurdistan state, they have quotas for parliaments that represents different minority groups. However, the reaction from the people was a bad one. Instead of looking at it as an olive branch, they said, why do you have affirmative action? Why do you have quotas? These people don't deserve that. As opposed to this being a good policy that represents the equality between communities. If you censor those atrocities and focus on the quality of policies moving forward as a post-conflict society, you create a far better reintegration for the future. The second thing that we're going to look at, and this is positive material by the way, because Amrit says we want to look at the past atrocities so that we have specific policies that caters to them. It's a rebuttal as well as a positive material. We don't want to set the tone in future relations and policy making that we should focus on sectarian divides and racial identities. And that's the problem here. Because if you have a racially targeted policy, that's when other minorities or other communities continuously feel oppressed because you have affirmative action. And that happens even in Malaysia, Mr. Speaker, even if their policies may be warranted or may not be warranted. We don't want to set that tone. In a post-conflict society, we want to focus on being racially blind and not focusing on the sectarian divides and developing these policies for the policies themselves. Thirdly, but before I move on, yes. If you say people have information that is short-term earlier, then wouldn't all the harms you just explained happen on your side right now?
No. Here's the difference here. People who are so actively part of the war will feel that way. The people who we want to influence are those who don't feel that part of the war, and people in the long term do not have as much access to information that is toxic, right? This debate is not about people who are already toxic and the both sides are not changing. There is a middle subset that we're changing. There is a future generation that we're changing. That's the focus of this debate. Thirdly, are people more likely to, according to Amrit, perpetuate victims' justice on the side of government? That is unlikely to happen because if you have a bad government who wants to perpetuate victims' justice, this policy will make absolutely no difference because that government will still be discriminatory. This is about a government who's just re-established itself and has some level of functionality. For example, this is not policies where governments are discriminatory. This is again like policies like Iraqi Kurdistan, where they're trying to implement better policies for the reintegration of society, but are unable to move forward because of those past historical remnants, right? And then they said, lastly, because it's so ambiguous, we don't know who's right and who's wrong, therefore we will just attack everyone. That doesn't make sense. That kind of emotional attachment is attached because there are historical remnants that fuel the political motivations of all communities involved. The moment we erase that, in the short term there may be backlash. In the long term, you create a society that has moved on and focused on how do we cooperate with each other with trust in absence of fear and evaluating which policies are good for all of us rather than which policies are good for your communities. Extremely proud to propose.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. And now to close the opening half, we invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Test. Hello. Hello. To quote a famous debate, they make it a wasteland and call it peace. The conflicts that ruined us as a person needs to be the stepping stones to fixing us as a community. By neglecting the atrocities that we inflicted upon the victims of the past, we only forget and neglect the ways that we can learn as a society to move on from our tortured histories. I'll ask a number of questions in my speech. The first question, in response to the second speaker's ideas, was one, will there be an access to information? Because the second speaker from government supported the fact that we do need information to move on. Because in the future, we're going to learn as a society without us needing to be exposed to images. That's important to not hurt other individuals. It's important to not repeat the mistakes of all. But what's the problem here? We think that, one, if people already know what happened, if people have a general conceptualization of the problems, then all the harms on our side still occurs in team government. Because people are still going to know that they've been wronged by a majority, they've been wronged by your victors. Therefore, the trade-off is the information that you have in your side is invaluable. And here's why. Because people are teaching their children, not based on what happened, but based on what they remember as victims. And therefore, you're not fighting a fight based on facts. You're not fighting a fight based on the actual people or minorities who are hurt. You're fighting a fight based on your own individual perception of what you think should be right or what you think should be wrong. But What about the individuals in the middle? Individuals who are immaterial to this debate. The moderates. We think this debate is about helping the individuals who have
Sir.
been wrong. The factions who are fighting to make sure that they are represented. And we are fine with these factions. We are fine with empowering their fight because in these cases, your victors have neglected them the ability to have reparations, the ability to be compensated for the war
Siddhartha.
that you have. This is a team that would support Holocaust denial. This is a team that would support the denial of the need to compensate comfort women in World War II. Because in their paradigm, it did not happen. But will this change anything? We don't think so. No, thank you. Because if there is a general conceptualization already, then parents are still going to have a monopoly over how they tell their children that the Malays were wrong, that the Indians were wrong. And why is this bad? We think that at least in our side, we have the media as a counterfactual to your bigoted opinions, to your closed opinions. The media now can be an alternative to children who are simply confused about whether or not I should listen to my parents and believe that a Malay person is different from me by virtue of being a Malay. This is how we incentivize individuals to conceptualize history on their own, on a method that is objective. The way to a good future is fixing the past, not neglecting it. No, thank you. But the second thing in this question is on guilt. What will happen to guilt and who accepts it? We think an acceptance of guilt happens when there's a visceral reaction. Because when you see a picture of a dead boy by the road, then you need to admit to the wrongs that you committed. You need to admit to atrocities because we've reported on them. We've reported on the fact that you are guilty for it. And regardless of how much you will try to deny it, you can't run away from the black and whites of facts, from the black and whites of examples. No, thank you. Therefore, we think that this increases the accordance of guilt because we reduce the ability for the victims to deny that they committed any wrongs in the past. Once we do move on as a community, once we do realize that we've been neglected and we need to be compensated, how will you get compensation for your victims if they have no facts to base it on, if they have no examples to go back to or reference their plight? No, thank you. Moving on, in your society caters to victims and neglect their victims. What about policies? We think that even if these are policies that are divisive, even if these are policies that will not be unilateral at first, we are fine with that. Because we are fine with divisive policies that cater to all people and give them some form of equal representation, compared to a policy that will only cater to the victors who have already won, who do not need the compensation as much. We instead on our side incentivize individuals to take back autonomy over their own histories and their own countries and their own cultures. And this is where they continue the fight for more equality in our side. Your side incentivizes them to neglect it and simply be a layman to this fight. No, thank you. So we justify the fight because at least now they can fight on some equal platform based on information. But before I move on, yes.
So can you please tell us, because Amrit said they would prefer a world that goes into constant conflict rather than face insidious discrimination, does that mean you support a constant state of struggle and conflict in post-conflict societies?
Here's where the fight becomes important. Because if we're living in a society where the victors neglect the victims, where the victors claim that the victims do not deserve to be compensated, then your society is not based on justice, it's based on bias. Therefore, if there is a fight in our society to get some form of justice for the victims who were wrong, we justify that fight by giving you the information to prove that your victors were wrong, that your victors committed atrocities. So this is a side that would tell their victims to lay it off, to not care about the fact that my father was murdered, that my mother was raped, to not care about the fact that we deserve justice. No, thank you. And here's where the comparative becomes important. Because in your side, you will have insidious, internalized discrimination that's based upon your own conceptualizations of what happened as a sole survivor of the war. And this leads to more racism between individuals. This leads to less representation of what actually happened and how we dealt with it, and more importantly, a lack of reconciliation because none of us have a clear picture of what happened and how we should collectively move on as a society. The only idea or image you paint to them are the images that they already have, these preconceived notions of what justice is. So, we're fine with you fighting for justice as long as this means you're fighting for reconciliation or the representation for more individuals. You neglect this on your side. But what about rubbing salt in their wounds? Because these people were hurt. They need to move on. Okay, we think that if we're rubbing salt in their wounds, and this is good. This is good if we're reminding you that you murdered civilians. This is good if we're reminding you that you raped women it's good if we're reminding you that you as a society committed atrocities to victims who never had a say. And why is this important? Because World War II films that allowed us to really report on the war leads to us criminalizing Holocaust denial in our side. We think it's important for you to remember, especially in the basis of national unity, because the most important thing that the country can do is learn from their mistakes, but secondly, not pretend that it didn't happen at all. When you pretend that it didn't happen, and this is when you incentivize more people to fight in your side, because the fight to be represented, the fight to be given attention, happens when you don't allow them to be represented, when you don't allow them to have their images or stories shared in the society. And that's where you increase division, that's where you increase segregation, but most importantly, no reconciliation.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition. And with that, we end the opening half of the debate. And now we invite the Member of Government to begin the closing side of the debate. Premier.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the floor, I know that living in Malaysia means that we live under government which never lies to us, or we have a media that is fair and reasonable. But unfortunately, we on government team will tell you why sometimes it is okay for governments to lie and manipulate history for a greater good, ladies and gentlemen. Before I move on to my extension in this debate, because what we're going to talk to you about is how we achieve national unity, and how we create more economic development, and how we create better governance in post-conflict societies. Before that, a few criticisms of opening opposition. Ladies and gentlemen, opening opposition's value proposition was that they want to have victims' justice, and they want victims of those wars to now be in power and have more rights. Ladies and gentlemen, opening opposition were happy for more war to happen, ladies and gentlemen. That means they are okay with these victims taking vengeance onto other groups. But what is the harm on their side? That means that wars become cyclical, because the victim of this war will now start another one, and the victim of that war will start another one, and it just keeps going on and on for generations. We will tell you why it is okay to sacrifice some justice for victims for a greater good. Secondly, their whole argumentation was premised in a situation where minorities or victims in this new post-conflict society is treated badly. This debate is not about quotas, this debate is not about whether or not we should give them rights. Of course we can have all these things. This debate is about how we talk about those things. Whether or not we should have these sorts of reports in the media. So we can still have your quotas, or your education, or UITM for Malays, it doesn't matter. The debate is about how we talk about that. So that's what we are going to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. Before that, 2 points of rebuttal. Number one, on victims' justice. First, we agree that victims deserve some form of justice, and we're happy to do that. So victims will still get welfare, they'll still get help, they'll still can go to universities, of course. But we will now want to help everyone, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, we would argue that victims' justice is a zero-sum game. What does this mean? It means that you can never fully gain closure. You will never be satisfied with the justice that you get. Think about what they said. They said, if you're not happy, just go to war. That's exactly what people will do, because there is nothing that the government can do to make you feel good about your mother or your father dying in wars, ladies and gentlemen. Victims will never feel satisfied. So what should the state do then? The state should now prioritize real lives today, ladies and gentlemen. The state needs to make a trade-off. That means the state needs to decide, okay, fine, the damage has been done and victims are dead. But today, we need to focus on this, the new country, ladies and gentlemen. So we are okay with making that trade-off. Secondly, they told you, oh, if we don't report on these wars, people are going to have different versions of what these wars actually mean. Number one, we tell you that there is no harm in that, ladies and gentlemen, because it's a bit like religion, right? We all have different religions. We say we have a God, but no one can prove which one's God is real. So if people have different versions of history, it's okay, because we'll just talk about it, but no one can actually say, oh, my version is correct, your version is wrong. But secondly, we say that's good. It's good to let people have their own version. Talk like, make whatever stories up. Let your grandmother tell you whatever stories happened during, the British occupation. It doesn't matter. That's a good thing. Why? Because when there's so many different versions, it's like it's a fairy tale. It's like it never happened, ladies and gentlemen. So all of us, my grandmother will say something, her grandmother will say something, Siron's grandmother will say different stories, but no one will know what actually happened. So it's good. It's like a fairy tale. Cerita dongeng. Move on. Right? Ladies and gentlemen, on to our extension. Sorry, I'm a bit later. Now, how do we better achieve national unity? How we are going to be different from open government? We're not going to tell you that some people win wars, some people lose wars, but there's people who start wars and there are people who lose out on these wars. So firstly, on the aggressor group, okay? On the aggressor, the person who committed all the atrocities. For example, the Hutus in Rwanda. The people who come from these aggressor groups, from that same race or from that same religion, will always and forever be labeled as evil. They will always be labeled historically and in the future as aggressors. They will be called the pariahs of the country, and no one, ladies and gentlemen, will want to integrate with these people. So the children of Hutus in Rwanda will always be labeled as evil because they came from the Hutu spawn. Secondly, what about victims? Victims, ladies and gentlemen, will always now be associated with weakness and will always be associated with people who need help. How is this harmful? Think, ladies and gentlemen, about Muslims. If we imagine if we never reported terrorist activities, imagine if we never reported 9/11, what would happen? It means no one would associate Islam and violence. No one would associate Islamic State to Muslims. No one would say, oh, you're a Muslim, you must be violent. That is exactly the kind of labeling that happens, ladies and gentlemen, when we report on these things. And secondly, for the victims, imagine if we never reported slavery in America. Imagine if we never told people that blacks were actually last time slaves. Today, we would see them as equals. We wouldn't see them as a lesser, second-class citizen, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be able to integrate people better. So this is exactly what happened in Rwanda. In Rwanda, after the civil war, race identification was abolished. No more Hutus, no more Tutsis. That's exactly how they move forward. So you don't know who is who, you don't know who committed the war, you don't know who's the victim. Everyone is the same, everyone's equal, and everyone moves forward. That's how we achieve national unity. I'll take one from opening.
So, in your world where these fairy tales are a result of my grandmother and my grandfather dying, wouldn't the association and homogenization be worse where it's not based on facts, but on different communities having different versions?
No, because everyone has a different story. It's like, it's like a fairy tale. Everyone has a different idea of what happened. And you can't say, oh, I want to go to war with you because my grandmother told me this story. Oh, my grandmother told me, no, that's not good. I mean, maybe some, like sporadically, some people might fight about it, but honestly, people just take it as a fairy tale and move on. Okay, how do we achieve better development? Because in a post-conflict society, we need to prioritize economic development. We need to prioritize policies which will benefit everyone. But what happens if we keep on reporting about wars? These wars from the victims or from the aggressors will be used as rallying cries by politicians, ladies and gentlemen. That's why you have Perkasa, for example, saying, oh, don't let the Chinese have business, otherwise we will go back to, Zaman dulu, where Malays didn't have anything. Or you look at, in current day, look at Donald Trump, what he says to groups, don't let Muslims into America, otherwise we will lose our American values. All these things, ladies and gentlemen, become rallying cries of politicians. It polarizes politics. Now, we won't have debates or discussions or forums like this where we talk about what is the best education policy, what should be the best tax, should we have GST or should we not, should we have this university or should we not, should we have this, should we sign the TPP or should we not. Now the discussion is, oh, I'm Malay, so I need this. Oh, you are black, so you should have that. It becomes rallying calls, ladies and gentlemen. If we don't report this, we allow people to focus on actual discussions. What are the policies that will achieve us growth? What are the policies that will create development? What are the policies that will ensure equality for everyone, regardless of race, regardless of religion, ladies and gentlemen? Now, my mother told me it was never right to lie. But I think that when there's a greater purpose, where we can prove to you on our side that we achieve unity better, then we definitely take this debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member of Government. We now invite the Member of Opposition to defend the case for opposition side. Here.
The problem with closing government in this debate is that the homogenization between religion and terrorism, the homogenization between nations and violence would exist during the conflict because media coverage would exist during the conflict. We need media coverage to separate Islam from terrorism. Because post 9/11, if we never had this coverage like closing government would want to propose, the immediate association would be women to burqas, the immediate association would be terrorism to individuals or specific groups. Media coverage helps us separate individuals from groups and create a difference between Muslims and terrorism, create a difference between slavery and individuals today. The problem with closing government is they never managed to prove the link. Why post a terrorist organization, post an ISIS attack and post 9/11, the immediate association and the immediate fear that an individual would feel would result to Islam. The immediate fear that an individual would feel would result to the nearest binding factor that it could feed on. The truth is, the media is the only thing that helps us get a larger depiction of why individuals aren't related to terrorism. Media coverage allows us to make that distinction between individuals from groups and ideals that are extremists. When you cut all information like closing government once, that is when homogenization happens because individuals cannot make that association, individuals cannot make that distinction. And the only thing that they know was that a person who believed in this religion caused this harm. He might be reflective of the rest of that religion, he might be reflective of the rest of that community. In a post-conflict society, post 9/11, Islamophobia would thrive under their paradigm because we wouldn't have media coverage to disprove it under any ground. But let's look at the second nuance that came from side closing government, or the second contribution that we thought was valuable. They tried to tell us that it becomes a fairy tale over certain periods of time. It might sound easy to believe, right? But when these are not just stories that are passed on from generation to generation, these are stories that people tell their children to exercise in real life. People tell their children not to go to Hutu schools or Tutsi schools, to not mix with individuals from specific generation. This is more than just a Malaysian conflict or the way in which we got past racism. It was a civil war where individuals suffered and died. It is not about individuals moving past it generationally. It's about individuals remembering it generationally. Remembering that there was no media coverage or airtime or not even a burial or a court case for their mother or father or even grandparents that died. The truth is, it won't be a fairy tale. It will be a prophecy that individuals carry by themselves to the next generation. Your children will tell their children to not go to schools that have individuals of different facets of society. It's unrealistic for closing government to believe that individuals will treat this like a myth when their lives, their parents depended upon that myth. When individuals died as a result of this genocide, it won't be forgotten as a fairy tale. It'll be forgotten as an injustice. Sit down. I'm going to prove one extension of this debate. Why post-war reconstruction needs to be inclusive. We are similar to opening opposition under certain circumstances, but obviously we're not extreme to saying that we need to go to war under every single situation. What closing opposition would like to argue under this circumstance? No, it's just an extension of their policy, right? Under our circumstance, what we would like to argue under this situation, A, we would prefer counter-narratives existing, with media existing, and not coverage by the victor's justice that they claim to happen. Counter-narratives always exist. There's a wide circulation of information which isn't indefinite to one victor. That is the side that they chose to defend. Have a seat. I'm going to ask one question to opening government then, right? Before I move on to my extension. Let's look at why opening government is principally flawed. Opening government created a debate on two parallel grounds. One, they tried to tell us that this is a debate about newly established states that have no affiliation to that conflict. But then they went on to tell us that, we can't have media because this newly established government will propagate victor's justice. This newly established government will propagate the side that won and want individuals to feed into that narrative. They need to pick which side it exists on. Whether the government is biased and systematically victimizes individuals, thus causing victor's justice to exist through the media that is operated by the state, or they are fair and just, which we're fine with as well, right? Why media coverage under both circumstances is something that we support. So now, firstly, why does post-war reconstruction need to be inclusive? Why is reconstruction inclusive? It's inclusive because it allows individuals to reconcile on the harms that happen, with the understanding that inclusivity under various circumstances allows individuals to come to the same conclusion and reach an end goal. It's true, not everyone will be happy, but it's as close that we can come to happiness as possible. With the Gakaka courts in Rwanda, where we allow individuals to achieve some level of reconciliation for the fallen brothers and sisters in war, it's extremely important for reconciliation to be inclusive. But this is the positive contribution from CEO, this part, right? individuals who suffer as a result of the war, or the losers of the war, are systematically disadvantaged by that circumstance. What does this mean? It means Tutsis under your paradigm, Kurds under your paradigm. These are individuals at that point in which are systematically victimized and are oppressed, and at the point in which they leave the war. It means that when a state is newly established, it will continue to victimize individuals. We are having a fight for quotas only because individuals come to the rationalization that maybe what their forefathers did was wrong. We have a fight for having some level of reconciliation in Rwanda. You guys can say this. We're having some level of reconciliation in Rwanda because we need to convince moderates that are on the fence that maybe what their forefathers did was not right. The truth is, the circulation of media allows us to come as close to a middle ground as possible. For both sides of the war, for some level of reconciliation. The wide and open media allows individuals to both view that. But what's their comparative? Let's engage with opening government here. They said every individual within the state is against quotas for Kurdistan. If we remove the information, do you really think individuals would change? They will still hold to the fact that Kurds don't deserve rights, they don't deserve any level of jobs. And this is the predominant opinion in the states. Media is the only way for us to convince individuals who carry opinions of ancestors at the end of the debate that they should exist. Actually, no, I'll take one.
Policies can independently focus on equal rights and equal treatments between communities without history. You are setting a tone for all post-conflict societies to continuously focus on sectarian policies and entrenching future generations in that sectarian divide.
But that's your problem, right? Under your circumstance, you recognize that policies will be trying to exist to formulate some level of equality. But the only information that individuals have was from that conflict zone at that point in time. That is the information that they will carry. They will be against your quotas under various levels. They won't allow Kurds to get rights. They won't allow Tutsis to get rights because at that point, the predominant opinion in that state that formulates policies, the ruling government in Rwanda is opposing to this. The only reason why we're coming close to your quotas is we're convincing individuals in Iraq and Kurdistan that maybe Kurds deserve right. We're convincing individuals in Rwanda, the Hutsis, we're trying to convince the Hutsis that at that point, certain individuals were victimized. The truth is, the losers of your war will be heavily victimized and heavily disadvantaged. We need to convince a certain group and come to some level of middle ground because the alternative of your paradigm is carrying on that predominant opinion and harming other individuals.
Thank you, Opposition Whip. Thank you, Member of Opposition. And now, to close the case for government, we invite the Government Whip.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I begin, can I please have a round of applause for my teammate? It's his first tournament and we've made the finals, ladies and gentlemen. When he first started, it was a 4-minute speech, and I worked with him. Now he's able to deliver quite an impactful speech. Ladies and gentlemen, closing government spoke to you specifically about two things. The first thing we told you was we cannot forget the context. Because in this model, there are a couple of things that side government can fear. The first thing that we can fear is that state has monopoly on resources and the dissemination of information. That is literally the trade-off. This means that we have enough power to tilt the balance to convince people that you can blame your deaths and your conflict on anything else but each other. So they needed to respond in a world where people are manipulated successfully and still give us a trade-off why justice must still be sought. That's the extension. That's how closing government entered this debate. To that extent, we also told you what the priority is. So in a post-conflict zone, we must suspend our preconceived notions of justice. So if in today's society, when things are relatively peaceful, maybe justice to you and me means that we must bring the accused person to court in order for them to meet a prison sentence. But the context demands a change and a shift of this understanding. Means that we must deprioritize that justice if that means that we can have better sustainable growth. How did closing government tell you this? Closing government told you this when we gave you a specific example of Prakasa and Ibrahim Ali, where individuals are able to capitalize on fear, destitution, and desperation in order to detract people from actual growth. So even if someone knows that this is a policy that's good for me, good for you, good for my neighbors, they think to themselves, maybe this shouldn't be the way because I fear that we'll go back in a state of conflict. Maybe we should set that aside. We must be angry first, and that is harmful, ladies and gentlemen. Fear-mongering, closing government sold that to you. Have a seat. The second thing we told you in the closing government was about actual discussions and why we dilute the violence that happens in closing government. So the structure of my speech from this point onwards will be in 2 weeks. The first is I'll deal with the clash in the closing house. The second, I'll solidify why opening opposition is just completely out of this debate. The first thing I'll tell you is the speech of the closing government, closing opposition. Have a seat. Not only was there a deliberate shaft of your opening opposition when you considered that it will not result in conflict, what closing government will do is, will deal with both angles. Have a seat. This is why your shaft was detrimental. If you say that people are so hurt, so depressed, so angry, where does that anger go? If you cannot claim that anger dissipates and people will be peaceful, so it must resolve in a conflict. That was the break in your logic that you never reconciled. That's why your shaft was detrimental. But it was even worse in opening opposition, but we'll get to the excitement later. The way these individuals chose to clash with Rafiq's point on fear-mongering was, that's right, he didn't, right? So he didn't tell us anything in regards to fear-mongering. And finally, maybe you should spend time being less angry yourself in your speech and then you'll be a better debater. The second thing we would say is we would prefer a world where reporting doesn't erase sit down. So what is the second thing that closing government clashed with in this debate? We would prefer a world where the immediate approach to something isn't immediately associated to Islamophobia. This is why Rafiq spent quite a bit of time telling you why we would rather say Osama was like Abu Dhabi that prayed to like elephants or something, so that people couldn't associate the World Trade Center with Muslims. You failed to see that, right? We would do anything, we would lie, we would say rainbows, the laser came from another planet and then shot down the World Trade Center. I don't know. Anything other than Muslims, Hindus, Christians, that's the point you needed to clash on. You cannot say that our lying is ineffective but so detrimental. That's why you lost the debate. Have a seat. Let's move on to the opening opposition. This is where I'm going to have some fun. So the first thing is they told us that the metric to sustainability in a post-conflict society is justice. But say that we will always go to war, no matter what, we will go to war. When you're shooting someone from their side, pause, then we'll have a deliberation, who is guilty, who is not guilty. So what is your justice? We never got an explanation from the opening opposition. At this point, Rafiq gave a very good indicator that these guys want is like a complete, like perpetual cycle of violence. So the point in which you say people are really angry, they just continuously go to war. So opening government also said this. But the nuance is this. You needed to give us an end. So at which point will people stop being angry? And we say that won't happen until a superior force, that is the state, is able to tell you and I that the deprioritization of anger guarantees sustainable development. If that means we lie to them, that is necessary and we're willing to do that. Opening.
So in your world, when you lie to these individuals and they still believe in that fight, wouldn't the result of our world be that individuals pursue justice at whatever cost and they stop when things are corrected?
See, you need to engage. Is our lying effective or not? That's the fiat you never engage with. Because you blur the lines, right? Let's talk about Israel and Palestine for a second. So like, we all have a general popular agreement that Israel is not wrong. But the extent in which the war has perpetuated, there's a continuous cycle, Hamas is getting more violent, there's always going to be individuals that is wrong on both sides. You lose that, you blur the lines, right? So we erase that line completely with our great resources and dissemination of information. That is why, even if you have people that your grandmother telling you, your grandfather telling you that your mother was killed and you need to avenge them, the insurmountable amount of evidence and influence that the state will print out and pass on in school textbooks to convince individuals that that didn't happen will monopolize the discussion and will reduce your ability to influence your children to go to war. Even if one or two individuals go to war, we think that go on the streets and protest and have guns, we think the rest of society will be convinced by our model that that isn't the truth and you're being tricked into this. Why is this important? The reason and the justification for this lie is that it guarantees a world where there is less violence. Ladies and gentlemen, around this time in the Great Democratic Republic of Congo is the monsoon season. And what happens is, ladies and gentlemen, when the rain comes and sweeps away the initial layers of mud, skulls of secret graves come up to the surface and it traumatizes individuals. That is exactly the outcome that side opposition wants. We think it's too late for the BRC, but we think it's safe and we should lie to the countries that can still be rescued. Let's free the prisoners of history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Government Whip. We now invite the opposition whip to the stage and to end the debate. Hear, hear.
Ladies and gentlemen, those who fail to remember history are condemned to repeat it. Form 1 textbook history. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk about two very important things in this debate. Number one, what do conflicts mean when media gets involved? Number two, how do we really quantify unity? I'll start with that. Unity is the only thing that transcends differences, which means under our side of the house, in order for a unified society to exist, they must realize that at one point in time, they were at a disagreement, but that's a disagreement that they can push behind them. The method in which you obtain this unity is not to say that that didn't exist, but to say that those are acceptable differences that we have come to realize were not justified. Therefore, the comparative at the end of this debate is whether or not the change they necessarily get is one that's more valuable because people forget about it, or because people generally reflect and internalize that that's not the just reason to be mad at each other. The first thing we're going to talk about within this particular issue is the vicious cycle of wars. Sit down. The first thing we're going to tell you is that the vicious cycle of warfare is something that is not mutually exclusive to our side of the house. This is something that happens under their side as well. Assuming individuals just generally don't have any information about the warfare, we think because parents are able to tell you what generally happens, or your preconceived notion about your cultural strongholds, these are also things that will result in you hating another person, or you hating another the oppositional party within that particular warfare. The comparative is different under our side of the house because we allow for discourse to exist. So the point at which the war stops is the point at which individuals are able to have a civilized discussion about the matter at hand. This is something that can never happen under their side of the house because as considered by them, the subconscious discrimination that will happen under their house is one that is not that the state cannot generally regulate. Under our side of the house, what does media generally do? Media opens up room for discussions because people are able to leave comments to tweets, or people are able to have blogs and forums about these sort of things. Which means, under those circumstances, our side of the house is able to tell you that even if there are differences, there are ones that will most likely be catered to because at the very least, ideas come into play. But we also think that within this particular regard, it is also important if we're going to defend war, why is it still okay under our side of the house? We'd say, in closing opposition specifically, that wars just generally come to a concrete conclusion to the problem. Here's the comparative. Because under their side of the house, when they continuously censor out and push out these sort of discussions, it means that no individual will or there's no uniform discussion or there's no uniform conclusion to the conflict at hand. This is problematic because an individual decides to discriminate another person based on ideas or based on reasons that they internalize for themselves. This is extremely harmful because these are ones that individuals from the different parties within that particular conflict cannot understand or cannot comprehend. The ability for them to come to a conclusion or consensus as to why they must accept each other becomes extremely diluted because these are things that they cannot necessarily accept. What do? Our manipulation is significantly better because we tell you these are the metrics as to why you must hate an individual, but don't hate them. We'll tell you why it's going to work a lot better. But on top of that, we also tell you that the only reason why you should feel offended is if this person is doing these particular things to you. Therefore, we uniform that sort of thing, but even better than that, we tell you why those things are things that you should not do in general. Therefore, the change or the trade-off on the our side of the house is that discussions that happen within our side are ones that come to a concrete conclusion that everyone can abide to. Therefore, the solution to this problem generally becomes significantly better. Closing.
Everyone in this hall learned about the communist insurgency in Malaya during the 60s, and we also know that a lot of them were Chinese. Don't you agree that today there is so much anti-Chinese rhetoric because we tell everybody that the Chinese were the aggressors in the past?
Yeah, so that was their extension. They told us this fairy tale idea how individuals will just generally forget about everything. There's certain problems with this because the examples and the context that they tried to put forth is a context of an international community. This is untrue when the instance takes place in a local or domestic area, which means that when my family is the one that's generally attacked within these circumstances, it is more likely that I'm going to internalize and realize that those are things that are true, which means this whole fairy tale idea is something that cannot necessarily apply. But more than that, the second issue I'm going to talk about is why incumbent powers are generally not biased. Because we think the whole of opening government's case, and to a certain extent closing government, back their ideas on whether or not individuals on the ground or losers towards the battle are going to use this as fuel or ammunition to try and regain their legitimacy. Firstly, we see that wars in general or conflicts in general cause war fatigue, which means individuals on the ground are less likely, have less of an incentive to want to opt into that particular warfare. We'd say that because of this, the incumbent power has less of an incentive to sensationalize problems or sensationalize the issues to a point where they get back to where they started. But more than that, we'd say within these circumstances, in a lot of post-conflict societies, we think there is international spotlight on the particular issue because there have been previous abuses to that, which means that incumbent power has every incentive to look good within those circumstances and look good as to gain legitimacy within the international community. So, at the end of the conclusion to this rebuttal is this: we say that as long as we can prove that these incumbent powers is generally not biased, we say that there is a form of legitimacy or neutrality that exists. What is the trade-off out of this? So, since we've established that incumbent powers are neutral to begin with, we say that the trade-off on the outside is significantly better. And the reason why is because individuals on the ground who are unaware of the situation, or individuals on the ground who have who don't participate in that particular discourse are able to participate now. But more than that, we provide a neutral medium for them to get involved. This is an exclusive benefit that only came out in closing opposition, because we told you how we are generally inclusive in nature when it comes to reformations. It is important for people on the ground, irrespective of whether or not you were involved in that particular issue, to understand that there is a tendency within our communities to opt back or just relapse into that particular conflict. Outside the house makes this an option that individuals can necessarily access within our circumstances because it's one that's neutral and facilitated by the state. We think that in principle, if side closing government are going to argue that it's okay to tamper history to a point where states are able to make individuals love each other, we think that our side does it best because it's predicated on the truth, not on a lie that individuals choose to tell because it's more convenient that way. Under our side of the house, the legitimacy within states, or the legitimacy that states generally carry, are ones that are significantly more important because we tell individuals on the ground that there was a problem and this is a problem you must realize because it's a problem that you must value. We think the process of attaining unity or the value of unity is also predicated on how the individual values the process of obtaining unity, which means that even if it comes to war, even if it means that individuals will continuously discriminate each other, this is something that we're willing to take into account because we say that that means there's a more valuable and sustainable change in the future, seeing that in the instances were to repeat itself, individuals know how to cope with it. At the end of this debate, we say the two youngest people in this room take the lead.